Chapter 8. Castaways. The fire was our only comfort throughout the long and dreadful hours of the night. Each new settling of the burning embers sent an explosion of sparks high into the sky, until all that was left was a perfect circle of glowing embers. Only fear kept us awake, fear of the unknown out there in the dark around us, and fear that one of us might fall asleep and leave the other to face the night alone. Every rustle behind us in the heather, the sudden squawking of a disturbed gull, even the soft groaning of a seal in the bay somewhere below us kept us both taut with terror. We talked all night long, as much as anything to keep out the noises of the night around us. I sought endless reassurances from Daniel, and he did everything. He did indeed seem to have an answer for everything. It was just that sometimes I found it difficult to believe him. "You think the birdman's here then?" I asked. How do you know it was him that lit the fire?" "Well, he's the only one who ever comes to Samson, isn't he?" Daniel replied. "And someone built this fire, didn't they? It has to be him. Stands to reason. And remember, you were the one that said you heard Prince barking just after we landed. They're here somewhere, got to be. Soon as it's light, we'll find the house he stays in. The only house on the island with its roof on still. That's what he told us, remember? All we've got to do is find it, and he'll be there. We can't leave the island in this fog any more than we can he? He can't leave the island in this fog any more than we can he? Don't worry, Gracie." "But I still don't know why he lit this fire," I went on. "Not unless he's signalling to someone out at sea. Perhaps that's it, Daniel. Perhaps that's what he's up to. He could be, couldn't he, Daniel? I mean, that's what those smugglers and wreckers used to do in the old days, isn't it? That's what I heard." "A smuggler?" Daniel laughed. "The Birdman, a smuggler? Don't be silly." "Could be," I said. "Why not?" "Gracie," Daniel said, "if you were a smuggler and you were signalling to a ship out there, would you do it in thick fog?" "All right then," I went on. "If you know so much then, you tell me why he's gone and built a fire in the middle of nowhere." "Who knows?" Daniel shrugged his shoulders. "Perhaps he's frightened of the dark. I know that's what I'd do if I found myself alone here in the middle of the night. Anyway, it's his island, isn't it? I mean, he lived here, didn't he? He can do what he likes. He can build fires anywhere he likes. You still don't trust him, do you, Gracie?" "Not after all he's done for us. You still don't trust him." "And what if he isn't here at all?" I said. "What if we don't find him in the morning? I mean, you'd think Prince would have heard us by now and come and found us, wouldn't you?" "He's here, Gracie. Honest he is. You'll see." "But what if those stories are true?" I said, lowering my voice to a whisper. "What if all Father told me is really true, and Samson does have a curse on it like Charlie Webber told him? What's going to happen to us then?" "You've only got to set foot on the island and you'll be cursed forever. That's what he said. That's what happened to Charlie Webber." "Tommy rot," said Daniel. "It's all Tommy rot. Everyone knows it's just stories." "Then why doesn't anyone ever land on Samson if it's all stories?" "They're just scared, that's all," Daniel said. "Just scared." "Well, so am I said. "It's this place, Daniel. It doesn't feel right. And it's not just the dark either. I'm not the one who's scared of the dark, am I? There's ghosts here, Daniel. I can feel them all around us. The Birdman told us, didn't he? And one of them's his own father. That's what he said, didn't he?" Just imagining things, I expect," said Daniel. "I mean, if you were alone on the island for long, you'd begin to imagine things, wouldn't you? And after all, he is old, isn't he? Anyway, he never said he'd seen a ghost, did he?" "No, but—" "Well then," Daniel said, "listen, Gracie. You ever seen a ghost? Have you?" "No. So if you've never seen one, how do you know they exist? You don't, do you?" "Perhaps not, but—" "Well then, if you've never seen them and you don't believe they exist, you know he was just imagining things. Must have been, mustn't he? And all those stories your father told you about curses and houses burning down and the scarlet fever, they're just stories, Gracie. I mean, everyone thinks the Birdman's mad, don't they?" "Yes." "Well, is he?" "No. And Big Tim said you'd catch his madness if you touched him. Well, you've touched him, haven't you? And have you gone mad?" "No." "Well then, stands to reason. It's all just stories, like I said. I mean, you can't believe in anything you see, can you?" "Well, can you?" "Anyway, Perhaps we've got nothing to worry about, I said. Perhaps we're not on Samson at all. But I knew full well we were. I could feel it. I could feel the ghosts watching us. They were out there in the darkness. I knew they were. I huddled closer to the fire, hugging my knees, and prayed and prayed. It seemed that on Samson it was the Terns that decided when morning should come. It was they who announced the dawn, even while it was still dark, filling the air with their raucous racket. If other birds joined in, we did not hear them. Terns ruled on this island, and the night knew it of old and left us swiftly. We had hoped that the fog might be gone by daybreak, so that we could get back home. But there was no wind to blow it away, and we knew well enough that autumn fog could hang about for days at a time over the islands, particularly over Samson. But it was not as thick as it had been the evening before. At least now we could see quite clearly for 10 paces or so ahead of us. The Terns flew shrieking in and out of the fog above our heads, fleeting pale grey shapes that seemed startled and angry to find us there. And once they found us out, they never left us alone, diving out of the fog at us until they drove us away from our dwindling fire. Neither of us wanted to leave it and face the dank cold of the island, and I, more than Daniel, dreaded our meeting with the Birdman. I knew how angry he would be to find us on Samson. I was for getting back to the boat at once and making for Briar and home, whatever the weather. It'll be easy enough now we know where we are, won't it? I said. After all, it's only a narrow channel between Samson and Briar. Gracie, Daniel said, if we get out that fog again, it'll be like yesterday, all over again. You think you know where you are, but you don't. We can't go, not yet. Father would kill me if I wrecked his boat. I prefer to face the Birdman, even if he is cross with us. But he won't be. I know him. We'll tell him we couldn't help it. And we couldn't, could we? After all, we didn't mean to land on Samson, did we? It's not as if we were snooping or anything, is it? It just happened. He'll understand. Come on, let's find him. Let's find that cottage. He's bound to be there. Daniel was adamant. There was nothing I could do when Daniel was adamant, and I knew it. He began by whistling for Prince, hoping his bark might lead us to them and save us the trouble of searching the entire island, but only the Terns replied. We tried calling, hands cupped to our mouths, but there was no answering bark. So we started to search. We followed the hill upwards from the fire and searched the higher ground first, for the fog seemed to be less thick up there. Every cottage we came to we found deserted and roofless. Fog curled out of gaping windows and doors so that each one looked like some ghostly apparition. They were elongated human faces that breathed out smoke from staring eyes and gruesome grinning mouths. I refused to go inside any of them. I would wait outside on the huge mounts of limpet shells that we found outside each cottage, while Daniel went in on his own to see if the Birdman was there. But he never was. All he ever found were a few rustling kettles and pots, a pair of shoes, white with mould, and some broken clay pipes. Of the Birdman and Prince, there was no trace. Every ruined cottage we came across gave me fresh hope. Hope that we might not be on Samson after all. If it was Samson, then there had to be a cottage with its roof still on. The Birdman had said as much, and we had not found one. So when Daniel emerged from yet another crumbling cottage, saying he was sure we must have searched every cottage on the island by now, I spoke out. Then perhaps you're wrong, I said. Perhaps this isn't Samson at all. Could be at St. Martin's or St. Agnes for all you know. But Daniel answered me by pointing over my shoulder into the fog behind us. I turned round, and there, not more than 20 paces away over the bracken, I could just make out the outline of a cottage with a roof and 2 chimneys. That's it, Daniel said. That's his. That's the Birdman's cottage. Don't know how we missed it before. Don't know how, and he ran past me and back into the bracken, fighting his way through until he reached the cottage and threw open the door. Prince, he called out. Prince! I stayed where I was, and not just because I was fearful of the Birdman's anger. I was seized with a sudden terrible foreboding. My last vestige of hope had been wrenched from me. We were on Samson. There could be no possible doubt about that, not now. I was cold and tired, but the shudder that went through me had nothing to do with that. It was as if some cold hand had touched me and left its curse on me. I could hear Daniel walking about inside the cottage. No prince ran out to greet me, nor were there any gulls lined up along the roof, as there most certainly would have been, had the birdman been there. "He's not here," Daniel said from the doorway. "There's no one here. He's been here, though. The ashes in the fireplace are still warm, and I can smell Prince. And there's something else here, Gracie. Look, come and look, quick," he said, and he went inside again. I hesitated. "Come on, Gracie," he called out. "Come on." Inside, the cottage looked almost the same as the birdman's cottage on Heathy Hill. There was one long table, a fire at one end, and a stove at the other. But here there were two beds in opposite corners of the room. One bed was unmade and the mattress rolled up, and on the other, the blankets were thrown back against the wall. There were shelves all around the room, but they were empty. "Look," Daniel said, pointing to the mantel shelf above the fireplace. It rested above the mantel shelf on wooden supports. At first glance, I thought it was a lance or a spear of some kind. Thick as a handle of an axe at one end, it spiraled towards a sharp point at the other. It reached across the entire width of the cottage, overlapping the mantel shelf at each end. As I came closer, it seemed to me to have been carved from a paler wood than the carvings back in the birdman's cottage on Briar. The surface gleamed in the cold light as if it had been varnished. "What is it?" I asked. Daniel reached up and touched it gently, almost tentatively. Then he ran his fingers along the horn from end to end. He did not turn round. "Come and feel it, Gracie," he said. I knew as I touched it that it was not made of wood. It was too smooth and too cold. We looked at each other. "That's real bone, isn't it?" I said. And suddenly I saw what it was. "It's off a unicorn. It's off a real unicorn." "Couldn't be," Daniel scoffed. "Couldn't be off a unicorn. There's no such thing." "Then what else could it have come from if it isn't a unicorn?" I asked. "Well, I don't know, do I?" said Daniel, and he reached up again and tried to lift it off the support. He could hardly move it. "But I'll tell you one thing for sure, Gracie, it's not off a unicorn. Too big for a start. Only place you'll see a unicorn is in pictures and storybooks, and I've never seen one big enough to have a horn this size. And don't tell me it's off a giant unicorn, because I don't believe in giants any more than I believe in unicorns. The birdman will know. He'll tell us where it came from." "Where is he?" I said. "He's not here, is he? He's not on the island." "Doesn't look like it," Daniel said, still preoccupied with the horn. "Then who lit the fire?" I asked. But he did not answer. He turned to face me. "I'm thirsty," he said suddenly. "You thirsty? People lived on this island once," Daniel said. "So there's got to be water, hasn't there? Must be a well somewhere. Only got to find it. Come on, Gracie." And he walked out of the cottage, not even looking behind him to see if I was following. I took a last look behind me at the horn above the fireplace and ran out after him. We searched all over the hillside around the cottage, but could find no well, so we were forced to look further afield. The longer we looked, the more thirsty we became. There was no talk any more of curses or ghosts or unicorns. We argued only over where it might be best to look next, for we were now craving for water and could think of nothing else. We must have trudged the length and breadth of that island several times that morning. From the top of the hills where the fog was beginning to clear, we could now look down and recognize Samson below us. Fog still covered the neck of the island, so it looked as if the twin hills of Samson were only two tiny islands surrounded by a sea of fog. The search proved fruitless. We were sitting dejected and silent on the top of a hill, looking over to where we knew Briar must be, hidden under the fog. I was thoroughly exhausted and miserable by now, and could summon up neither the strength nor the enthusiasm to continue the search. I just wanted to go home. "Let's go back to the boat, please, Daniel," I begged. "Let's not stay here any more. I hate this place. Let's go back to the boat, please." "Gracie," he said suddenly, and he was hauling me to my feet. That's it. Why didn't I think of the boat before? All right, we can't drink, but we can eat, can't we? Look, Gracie, we can't leave till the fog lifts. You know we can't, but we can't just sit here and wait, can we? So why don't we have breakfast?" "Breakfast?" I said. "Pilchards or bass," Daniel said, a triumphant grin on his face. "Take your pick. We've got a fire, haven't we? Still hot enough to cook on. Bet it is. And we got fish back on the boat, haven't we? The promise of food was enough to banish at once both my thirst and my exhaustion. We ran together down through the high heather towards the fog-covered beach below where we had left the boat the night before. The hill was so steep and I was running so fast that my legs finally could not keep up with me any longer, and I tumbled headlong into the heather, rolling over and over until I came to rest at last in a clearing of soft grass covered in a sprinkling of rabbit droppings. When I sat up, I saw Daniel on his hands and knees beside me. He was not at all concerned with my welfare, but was parting the bracken in front of him. "It's a well, Gracie," he called out. "It's a well. We found the well." It had been dug at the foot of the hillside and was lined all around with stones. Together we peered over the edge, but it was too dark to see anything. I reached down with my hand to touch the water, but there was nothing there. Daniel picked up a large stone and dropped it down, but there was no answering splash. We heard it bounce once, twice. It was stone on stone. The well was quite dry. Daniel sat back, on his heels. "Perhaps that's why the people left here," I said. "You can't live on an island without water." And then Daniel was on his feet again. "Never mind," he said. "We've still got the fish." We chose to eat the pilchards because they were small and would cook quickly, we thought. But the smell of them was so good, and we were so ravenous, that we only half cooked them, eating the outside of each one and throwing the rest of the gulls in turns to keep them happy. I never much cared for pilchards, and I haven't ever since. But that day on Samson, we ate them until we were full, and no fish ever tasted so good. I think we ate as much wood ash as we did fish, but neither of us cared. I was wiping my hands on the grass when I first noticed the rabbit. It was sitting looking at us, out of the bracken, only a few feet away, and it was perfectly black. It seemed quite tame, so I thought I would try to get closer. I was crawling slowly towards it, and was within inches of touching it, when Daniel shouted out, "Gracie! Gracie!" The rabbit bolted into the bracken and disappeared. Daniel was on his feet and laughing. I was surprised and angry at him for frightening the rabbit away. "It's going, Gracie, it's going," he shouted. "Of course it's going," I stormed at him. "What do you expect a rabbit to do if you shout at it like that?" "Not the rabbit," he said. "Not the rabbit, Gracie, the fog. The fog. Look, Gracie, it's going." And sure enough, below us was the infinitely wonderful sight of the sea shimmering blue through the mist below us. "Let's go home, Gracie," said Daniel, and he did not have to ask me twice.